Well, you have quite a bit of actual experience with the Jetstar, right?
Yes, about 8,000 hours in the Jetstar, a little over. And I've checked out a large number of corporate pilots who became chief pilots for their company who bought a Jetstar.
And you were flight safety. You worked for Flight Safety International from '78 to '88, doing class room and simulator and stuff. And it says here on my notes that
that was all about the Jetstar. You can add that to that.
Yeah, the you see, you got to fly Vice President Johnson around one time or more.
Yeah, and that wasn't at Flight Safety. That was for Lockheed when I was doing the demo flights around.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And another thing, when I was first.
There wouldn't he be flying in Air Force planes?
That was an Air Force airplane. The Air Force bought 21 of them, I believe.
Okay.
They were UC-7 something or other. I can't remember the number now.
Well, why were they having a civilian pilot fly the vice president?
Because there were no Air Force people checked out in it.
Oh.
And I was training Jim. Can't remember Jim's last name. I got it in my logbook in there. And his buddy who came down to Lockheed when the Air Force first bought him, and they were to get checked out. And then after I got them checked out, they sent me to Washington to Andrews Air Force Base with the squadron there, where they call it, that flies Air Force One, the presidential squadron. Anyhow, I went to join them, and they were going to handle the Jetstar and the 707, and so I was checking their people out. Checked out Jim and his buddy, and then I checked out the squadron commander there, and 3 or 4 others. I don't remember enough to get their instructional capability up where they could continue on their own.
Mm-hmm.
I stayed up there for 6 months, got their business going with the Jetstar, and that was the period that in doing their training that the Air Force apparently the Johnson had called and said it needed an airplane, so they said, well, you can take the Jetstar. Okay. He probably said, I need the 707. They said, you can't have it. And so he said, well, I'll take what's next. So took the Jetstar. That'd be just like him anyhow.
Did you meet him, or was he just in the back?
I met him as he came on, but
Yeah.
he was just in the back, yeah. In fact, the story I got from whoever was back there was that he got tired in riding. He just shed all his clothes, stripped off naked, laid down on the couch, and there were 3 or 4 women back there that he just part of the party of other people. He didn't, I guess he knew them, but he didn't care.
Huh.
I heard all kind of stories, but I heard a lot of stories. I flew another Jetstar trip. We went down to Texas to his ranch down there. He had a 7,000-foot strip on his ranch, gravel strip. We landed down there with a Jetstar, and the Secret Service people there who protect him, I guess you'd say, were telling a lot of stories about how they had their hard life down there trying to keep up with him. He'd get in his car and try to lose him. They'd try to follow him, and he'd drive as fast as he could all over that whole ranch, all miles around there, and try to get rid of them. And all kind of stories. If I could remember them all, I could tell you all kind of stories about Johnson. Most of them not very favorable.
Okay. Okay, then you were I guess from '88 after you left Flight Safety. Tell us about kind of what Flight Safety. Anything noteworthy there that you want to say, or was that fun time, or was that not a good fun time?
Well, it was fun time. I enjoyed it very much, but I was getting pretty older by then, and I wanted to keep flying, but I didn't want to move out of town. I was back in my hometown there in Marietta, and I didn't really look for a flying job. I could have got a job with a lot of the Jetstar people I've flown with. They offered me jobs, but I didn't really want to do that, and so. One of the instructors left that was teaching at Flight Safety was leaving, and a friend of mine was manager by that time, and he called me and said had an opening there. So I said, well, I'll try it. I went and worked the simulator for a while, which was just a step-in process, not difficult for me at all. And then after being there a little while, then the classroom instructor left, and they offered me that job, so I took that and found a real mess teaching the original pilot checkout course on Jetstar, which FlightSafety offered, and found a terrible mess. They'd been running it that way for years, and it was terrible. That's all I can say about it. But after I'd been there for a couple of years, I managed to work and get the course organized and the material lined up and the proper presentation methods and everything, and finally got it to where I got a lot of feedback from the customers that it was the best ground school they'd ever had. So I think I got that course whipped into shape. And then later, Don Baldwin went to work for FlightSafety in New York. He was a friend of Al Uchis, who owned FlightSafety, and I had flown with him when Texaco bought Jetstar, and I checked out a lot of their pilots. And so Don Baldwin was right now working for FlightSafety, and he came through on orders from Al Uchis to find out why my teaching was my class was more popular than any of the others around, what I was doing down there. So Don came to me and I talked to him a little bit and told him. He didn't seem to understand it, but I doubt if it's kind of hard to understand unless you're really into instruction.
Yeah.
But anyhow, they spread the method around as best they could. FlightSafety had one other good instructor down in Savannah that I had gone through his school when I went through the Gulfstream school down there, and I reported back as a student through a class that this was a good instructor and the only one you got down here and so forth. His name was Jack something too, and he came with Don to see what I was doing there, and I told him that he was the best instructor I'd ever had. I don't know what he was coming to me for. He was fine. But anyhow, I guess they took the two guys and meshed them together somehow to try to improve some of their classes. There's not much detail to go into there about what it was, except that one thing that we talked about before about the circuit breaker thing in their checklist that I did get changed. Instructional situation, which was a great pleasure because they were all pilots to talk to, and they were all pretty good pilots by then coming to Jetstar school.
Mm-hmm.
So I learned a lot from a lot of them. There's one guy that was the FAA people said, if you come see me, I'll let you fly my super cruiser on floats on the river going through Ottawa there. I'd like to have done that, but didn't.
So then you, in 88 through 2000, that's about 12 years, you were training people in the Atlanta area. Was that as a pilot instructor?
Yes, just the local airport there, my home airport, McCollum. I was flying around there doing tail dragger instruction, instrument instruction, multi-engine instruction, and original pilot licenses. Just general instruction procedure, except for tail dragger. Not very many tail dragger instructors.
Were you ever involved with any home built or experimental aircraft?
Well, I had a few check rides in the home builds and that sort of thing. Now, I was always attentive to everybody that was doing it. It was an interest to me, but I never did build one.
Mm-hmm.
But I had a lot of friends do building them, and got a lot of opportunities to ride with them. And sometimes they'd come up for pilot license with their home builds. I had to fly them, so I got a lot of flying in them. I remember one guy that I'd known for quite a while. He built a Whitman Tailwind, one of the first ones, and had been flying it for a year or so. And one day, happened to see him, and I asked him how it was. He said, "Well, it's fine, except I seem to use up so much distance landing." And I said, "How much you use?" And he said, "About 3,000 feet." And I said, "That's not right. What's your approach speed?" And he said, 95. I'm not going to fly it any slower than 95. If you fly slower than that, the controls get mushy and don't feel right, so I'm not flying any slower than that. And so I said, well, let me go with you. So I flew with him and flew it a little bit, and sure enough, I was slowing down and I got about there, and the control suddenly gave like that, and then they became fine again. So I just kept on slowing down. I finally got it down to around 55, and it was flying fine. So his name was Gene. I said, well, see, it's Gene, all you got to do is just come on through that place, keep going. It'll fly as slow as can be. Good flying airplane. So he continued that way and started doing that and got where he could land good and short then. Tailwind was a pretty good airplane, but did have a controlled pressure transition about 95 there. It was a little strange, but didn't hurt anything once you got used to it.
Tell me about that time you flew. It was a home built, I think. It was the smallest airplane. I don't know if it was the smallest airplane in the world, but
It was a home built.
it was a home built and
It
the
was-
C5 Galaxy on the same day. Or what was that all about?
That was a Corbin Baby Ace, and that was built by the mechanics class at Lockheed. That was when I was at Lockheed, flying the C5. And the mechanics class, they had several go through, I guess, but this one class, they decided to build this Corbin Baby Ace, which at that time was the smallest airplane around. And so they built it, and they wanted to fly it just to sort of as a graduation present, you might say. The mechanics class built it, they couldn't fly it. So nobody else in flight operations could fly light planes, so they called on me, and I got my friend, who was a wonderful mechanic, J.B. Williams. He was working at Lockheed at the time, and I got him to take it and look it over, be sure it was okay. So they sent out first flight cards to the public and invited all the mechanics class and everybody, and had a big thing on a Saturday there, and I had the airplane out there, and I got that picture of me in that, and flew it around the field, but it flew terrible. It was really tail heavy, so I had to fly with the stick almost all the way forward and well over to one side to keep it going, but it flew perfectly okay. It just took odd.
It was out of trim, way out of trim.
Yeah, way out of trim. That's all really mattered. I had no trim tabs. It was extremely simple airplane, little airplane. It wasn't so little. There's been a lot smaller airplanes since then.
So you got out of that plane and then you flew the Galaxy?
Yeah, I was scheduled at flight operations that day for a C5 that was, I believe, was ship 10. There was a big rush to get ship 10 out on schedule, so we had a crew in on that Saturday. And even though I was up and doing this in the morning, I had to go right as soon as I got through. They went right down the flight line, got on that airplane and flew that C5, and we got ship 10 out on. I got a letter from Lockheed, a specific letter for that, because we had worked hard, and some of our crews had stayed way late into the night several times trying to get that airplane finished up, all the pre-flight and the flights, get it finished on time, but it finally made it, so I got a letter of commendation from Lockheed for that particular event, get that airplane out on time. They had a big write-up in the Lockheed paper about it.
That's cool. Well, that must have been a different feel going from the Baby Ace to the Galaxy.
Not at all.
Still a stick, huh?
If you fly thousands of hours in each one, it doesn't make any difference.
Huh.
If you didn't fly but one ever, and then all of a sudden had to fly the other for the first time, it'd probably be a difference, but not in that case at all.
Yeah.
I guess you can go back to my 50,000 hours of flying and say, it don't make any difference once you've flown that much. They're all about the same. They got to be mighty peculiar to fly different. Each airplane's a little different, but it's just like flying a model. You just have to try it once, and pretty soon you adapt to that, and then it's okay.
Well, when I was in sailboats, I used to say the smaller, the more fun they were. I think maybe airplanes are like that a little bit too. Maybe they feel like you're more of a bird or something.
Unfortunately, I've run into a lot of people, pilots particularly, who would say, well, if it's not a C5, I don't want to fly it. It's not worth my time. I remember one of my good friends at Lockheed was an Air Force pilot. He had learned to fly on multi-engine airplanes, and had been flying B-47s in SAC before he came to Lockheed. His favorite saying was, if you divide the engines by 2 and come up with less than 4, you don't want to fly that airplane. That's kind of what I call pilot snobbishness. There's an awful lot of people like that, and even on the other side, there's some general aviation pilots that'll say, well, that big airplane, I don't want any part of it. They just It's just what I got that's best. That's a natural thing. But
Yeah.
people get carried. It's like politics. People get carried away giving their own opinion about that. I don't think it's true at all. They're just trying to say something to catch everybody's opinion. Notice, make me important. That's what the idea is. My airplane's the best airplane.